Donald Trump spiking the football today. You're going to want to hang around for this. Mitt Romney, what's going to be the fallout? Is there going to be any fallout for his ugly betrayal? And finally, I'm going to show you who's going to be president in the year 2040. All that's coming up right now on I'm Right. Well, it's Celebration Day if you're President Donald Trump and all of President Donald Trump's supporters. You see, when you go through what he's gone through for the last 3 years and finally you walk out vindicated after the Senate trial, you are going to do a little bit of celebrating, a little bit of spiking of the football. You can say that's childish. You can say that's petty. I say that's perfectly normal and human. What would you expect the man to do? What president has gone through that kind of harassment for 3 years? And look, if you want to make the argument that Trump with his bombastic style brings a lot of it on himself, I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that at all. But what president has had to go through a special investigator? Remember, they tried to cite the 25th Amendment to overturn his presidency, and then an actual impeachment. The man has been impeached. All through this, you can make the argument, if you look at the facts, as we always present to you on this show, he didn't do anything wrong. And one more thing, as long as we're talking about this impeachment thing before we go to all the Trump coverage of today, there was a lot of talk about quid pro quo. You know that word. I think it must be Latin or Spanish or something. I don't know. I didn't really go to college. But the point is, it's, give a little, get a little. That's quid pro quo, right? Why is that bad? He's the president of the United States of America. He's the chief executive of the United States of America. What do you think leaders of countries do? Why do you think they get on the phone with each other? Why do you think they have these gigantic conferences? Do you think it's all, hey, Larry, how you doing? Hey, your shoes look really nice today. I had a great pizza. You got to come try it. They're there trading favors. That's what leaders of countries do. And you can yell and scream about the fact, well, you shouldn't be looking into Biden. Well, why? Joe Biden is exempt from being investigated for criminal activity, for potential criminal activity because he's running for president? Is that how we do things now in the United States of America? That standard certainly didn't apply to Donald Trump when the FBI was getting FISA warrants to spy on his campaign. Funny how that works. Ask yourself, what's wrong with quid pro quo? Do you want your president to never engage in it? I mean, I personally remember very well Barack Obama sitting down with Russia and saying on camera in that famous hot mic moment, saying, I'll have more flexibility after the election. What do you think he was talking about there, ladies and gentlemen? More flexibility to swap good barbecue recipes? No, he's talking about trading favors because that's what leaders do. That's what leaders of nations do. There's nothing shocking about it. There's nothing illegal about it. What bothered me about this entire thing was that Trump couldn't just come out and say, and everybody agree, yeah, I swapped favors. We're the United States of America. You're Ukraine. If you want our military dollars, you're going to do some things that I want, or you're not getting our military dollars. Sound good? I mean, remember, the money we were sending Ukraine, the money we send all over this daggone planet, that's your money. That's my money. Every single day you get up, throw your work boots on, and you head out for 8-9 hours a day. You're working the first half of the day for the government so they can just flutter the money all over the planet. If they're going to do that, which I think sucks anyway, but if they're going to do that, I would like something in return. Is it out of the question to ask for things when we give things? No. It's not out of the question. It's always happened since the history of the world began. It will always happen until our earth ends. That is the way life works. That's the way reality works. Welcome to adulthood, ladies and gentlemen. So I never got the whole controversy behind this whole thing anyway. Nevertheless, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I do that sometimes. We had an acquittal yesterday in the Senate. Donald Trump, clearly happy about it. National prayer breakfast this morning. Here he was.
As everybody knows, my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation. They know what they are doing is wrong, but they put themselves far ahead of our great country.
Sounds like Donald Trump had a rough night, by the way. You know he's a teetotaler, but it sounds like he was up pretty late. Who knows, maybe he has a cold. But let's address this hurt our nation thing he just talked about. I mean, he's right. We like to have a lot of fun on this show. We always will. We're always going to keep it as light as possible and poke fun at people and poke fun at ourselves. That's just, life's too short to be all serious and miserable. But this did hurt America. It hurt America in the eyes of Americans. It hurt America in the eyes of people who aren't Americans. When you have a party, and it's fine to have political parties opposing each other. That's how it works in every country. But when you have a party trying to bring down the leader, legally trying to bring down the leader of that nation for reasons nobody can really articulate, that hurts the country in the long run. And we are at a period of time in the United States of America, and some would argue that this is a good thing, where we have uniquely lost faith in American institutions. It's not as if anybody has ever loved politicians. You shouldn't. They're scumbags. What's that old Ronald Reagan quote? Or no, Mark Twain quote, where he said politicians are like diapers. They should be changed often and for the same reasons. Look, politicians stink, but you've always had at least some kind of confidence. Maybe they're kind of working for the country. They're not working for the country. You just watch Democrats sit on their hands when Trump talked about unemployment numbers. We've lost faith in the FBI. I will tell you, especially as a young man, I work, construction jobs, normal life. I dreamed of being an FBI agent for a time in my life. I always looked up to that. The guy in the blue jacket with the FBI, and wasn't that cool? I will tell you, after the last 3 years, I hear the words FBI, and I go, sorry. More than just that, the Boy Scouts, scandal after scandal, the Catholic Church, scandal after scandal. But what do you have faith in now? When you lose faith in the institutions of your nation, that is bad for the future of the country. And when you impeach a president, just because you're having, the mads about 2016, it hurts the country. It does. America is worse off for it. I have no issue with Democrats opposing Republicans. I have no issue with mud-throwing politics. That's politics. It's always been that way. When you take it too far, as they clearly have, you hurt a nation. Anyway, Trump went on.
So I've always said they're lousy politicians, but they do two things. They're vicious and mean. Vicious. These people are vicious. Adam Schiff is a vicious, horrible person. Nancy Pelosi is a horrible person. And she wanted to impeach a long time ago when she said, I pray for the president. I pray for the president. She doesn't pray. She may pray, but she prays for the opposite. But I doubt she prays at all.
Kind of a cheap shot, but, where's he wrong? If you're Nancy Pelosi or you're Nancy Pelosi's supporters and that kind of talk upsets you, did you see how she just conducted herself at the State of the Union? She made herself look bad. And look, Nancy Pelosi's the queen of petty, always has been the queen of petty. That's fine. But just don't do that thing they always do where they walk out and I'm really above all this. It's a shame Donald Trump is such a ruffian. Man, they're all scumbags. He kept going.
I think what we could have done if the same energy was put into infrastructure, prescription drug prices. Think of what we could have done. And I'm now talking both sides. Think of what we could have done if we had the same genius, because it's genius. I will say it's genius on the other side, maybe even more so, because they took nothing and brought me to a final vote of impeachment. That's a very ugly word to me. It's a very dark word, very ugly. They took nothing. They took a phone call that was a totally appropriate call. I call it a perfect call because it was. And they brought me to the final stages of impeachment. But now we have that gorgeous word. I never thought a word would sound so good. It's called total acquittal. Total acquittal.
Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, Trump is a little wounded from all this. We all like to think of Donald Trump, especially people who are his biggest supporters, as, this brutal fighter, this street fighter. That's part of the reason Donald Trump is elected. I would argue that's the reason he sailed through the primary. Even though I opposed him in the primary, I said to everybody at the time, Trump is a battle axe. You can argue about all the other candidates. This guy did this better. This guy did that better. The bottom line is the right was angry after 8 years of Obama and 8 years of watching Republicans play the doormat. And so they wanted a street fighter. And there you have Donald Trump. But I think in a private moment, Donald Trump would tell you this actually hurt him. Because every president, when you get up there, when your ego gets to that level, it's human nature. When you're the head of a nation like this, you want to look back on your legacy. They all build presidential libraries to themselves, and that's just the history of the world, right? Well, part of his story is now going to be the fact that he was impeached. And you don't want that. You don't ever want that. And I do wonder going forward, if Democrats aren't going to pay a price for that. Because if you think Donald Trump is going to forget that they did impeach him over nothing, you've got another thing coming. Trump even took some time to take a little shot at Jerry Nadler.
I mean, Nadler, I know him much of my life. He's fought me in New York for 25 years. I always beat him. And I had to beat him another time. And I'll probably have to beat him again. Because if they find that I happen to walk across the street and maybe go against the light or something, let's impeach him. So I'll probably have to do it again because these people have gone stone cold crazy. But I've beaten them all my life, and I'll beat them again if I have to.
Tell you a little funny story about Donald Trump and Jerry Nadler. Obviously, as you just heard right there, he knows Jerry Nadler well. They've known each other their whole lives. You remember Jerry Nadler was at some public event, I forget, a few months back. I don't do research for the show, but he was at a public event. And Jerry Nadler's getting up there in years, and his wife's battling pancreatic cancer. We'll say a prayer for her if you think of it. And Jerry Nadler was sitting there. It was an event, looked like it was in the sun, and he got kind of woozy-eyed and passed out at the event. Somebody had to hand him some water, pat him on the back. You know, for all their public fighting and all this sniping back and forth, Donald Trump called Jerry Nadler in private just to check on him and wish him well. Kind of a cool little story, right? At least some people are human. I'm just not one of them. All of that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. Coming up, we have Drew Bergquist to talk about this and other things and whatever else I choose to harass him about. But first, betdsi.com/Jesse. By the way, do you know, I've been telling you football's over, football's over. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I was wrong. We've got the XFL coming, and you can bet it at betdsi.com/Jesse. Don't forget to use the promo code Jesse120. If you do that, you get 120% matching. Don't forget the promo code. It's free money. Don't give up free money. So start making a deposit, start putting some extra cash in your pocket, people, and start spicing up the sports world. Nothing makes a game more exciting than when you got a little money on it. I love doing that, especially when there's nothing on television. You don't want to turn on the new, horrible show you can't watch with your kids. Why not turn on a basketball game? Why not throw $20, $50 on a basketball game? What's the harm in that? Go to betdsi.com/Jesse. Use the promo code Jesse120. And look, it's not just sports, although you can bet sports. Obviously football, basketball, baseball, all these things. You can do that. You can also bet on politics. You can bet on reality television. Just go check it out. betdsi.com/Jesse. Promo code Jesse120. Joining me now is the host of This Is My Show with Drew Bergquist. Yes, his name is Drew Bergquist. And did I forget to mention he was former CIA? I mean, he claims former CIA, but he could still be there deep cover. He wouldn't tell us. He certainly wouldn't tell me. Drew, how former is it?
It's pretty former. I don't think I'm in the shape to do my old job anymore.
All right, you know what? You and I have actually only ever broken this down in private. Could you elaborate just a little bit for people what a counter-terrorist super spy does?
Well, it depends on the person and the role. There's a lot of them. So I worked specifically with a lot of indigenous personnel, special.
Indians and stuff like that?
Well, we got to teach them to do some of it. We end up doing all of it for them. It's like teaching your kids to do it this way, but in the end, you end up doing it. You end up doing their science project for them. But no, so we worked a lot with them. Worked a lot with special operations forces, and did kind of more of a paramilitary role. There's folks who do it a very different variety and have a different role. Mine was just a little bit more paramilitary.
Yeah. So look, Drew, you don't have to be humble about the whole thing. Why don't you just go out there and say, I was actually doing the real work while all the pencil pushers were back in D.C. But that's another matter. Drew.
That's another matter indeed.
Donald Trump goes out there today, spikes the football a little bit, lists down all the people he loves, of course, lists down all the people he hates. What'd you think of it?
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great, how he held up the newspaper, from WashPo, called horrible Pelosi and Schiff horrible people and a disgrace. It was great, but it's also true. The character or lack thereof that we've seen from these people over the last several years, and particularly these last several months where it's been hot and heated more so perhaps than ever. We've seen their true colors, and they really just are awful people. Like, there's not a whole lot else you can say about it. It's not a political thing. I don't like their politics, but it seems like they're just not good people.
Where do we go from here as far as the Democrats go? Do they really try it again? There's rumors they're going to try it again. Surely they're not that dumb, right?
I mean, if history is any indicator, I think that they are. We've seen it with Kavanaugh, we've seen it with Mueller, we've seen it with this. I mean, it's been literally since before Trump even took the oath of office, and then ever since then, it's the same playbook every time. If you pay close attention, it's literally just a smear campaign, and then they hope that it works, and it never does, and somehow they keep coming back for more. So I think that, first of all, I think it's going to backfire big time for them in November. I think that the icing on the cake was her tearing up that speech the other night. Everyone thought that was classless. At least the people that matter, and the independents, had great reviews of the State of the Union. So I don't think that plays well with them. But I agree with you. I think they're going to try it again, and I think it's going to blow up even more. And eventually, they've got to come back to more moderate, typical establishment Democrat values if they want to be relevant, I would think. But, I mean, they keep doing it, so I guess I'm wrong.
No, look, I believe you're right, too. I just don't think we've found the bottom yet. And look, not to change the subject, but I'm a TV host. I do that sometimes. It's, it's real professionalism. But Iowa, look at what's happening with Iowa. We have Bernie Sanders now declaring victory in Iowa. I think there are only like 6,000 votes left to count as of this show. As soon as Bernie declares victory, now we have the head of the DNC, Tom Perez, coming out and saying, nope, they need to recanvass the whole state. This whole thing looks like they're trying to torpedo Bernie. His people are already mad. And not only has Bernie won Iowa, he's obviously going to win New Hampshire. He wins New Hampshire every time. This party is about to implode on itself. They're freaking out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the funny thing is you're right. This is 2016 all over again for Bernie Sanders and his followers. They're trying to make sure that he does not win. Biden comes in fourth there. I don't think he's going to do that well in New Hampshire either. And then the question is does he even stay in it? So Bernie's surging to the top. But they had 4 years to figure out how to test this app, have this all go well. Iowa was like the big show for them, and they totally botched it. And it was a complete and total disaster, which I think is hilarious. But now they are breaking apart at the seams. How they recover from this, I don't know. But they don't have anyone in their Rolodex right now that I think can stand up to President Trump.
What about Mike Bloomberg? I'll be honest, Drew. Now, I've been honest about this. I don't think Trump is beatable as long as the economy's good. It's just very hard to unseat a sitting president. It's impossible to unseat one with a good economy. It's never been done before. But if I had to say I was worried about anybody, man, I'm a little bit worried about Mike Bloomberg. His buying power is strong. And that ad he ran in the Super Bowl and the ads he's running on every single freaking television show, that's a lot, man. And that buying power, it's worth something.
No, absolutely. When you can double down and because look, I mean, he hasn't pulled well. He hasn't done a lot up to this point, but now he's starting to spend all of this money. And there's people who do think that he's someone who's a little bit more moderate in certain areas than, obviously than Bernie. So I think you're right. I think that he is a threat. For a while, I thought Joe was maybe going to be a threat just because he was moderate and that hopefully people would come back to reality. But he just can't get out of his own way. He can't stop sniffing people. So now we've moved on, and the most moderate person is Bloomberg. So it's I don't know. I don't think he can win either. But you're right. I mean, if anyone can go toe to toe in terms of spending and messaging, I think that he's got a shot.
Drew, you're a fancy spy type. I need you to break somebody down psychologically for me. You just brought up Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. Why still be in this race? And I really genuinely mean that. He's had horrible family loss. He's been a senator for 30 years, vice president for 8 years. Okay, you decided to run for president. Okay, you look like a moron now. That clearly was a bad decision. Why not just walk away? Go golf. Go down to Florida. Just enjoy your life like every other old person down in Florida. What are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I'm in Florida, and there are a lot of old people here. Someone literally was stopping at every crosswalk in the car the other day. I don't know that they should be driving, but I think I don't know exactly. My sense is that people initially came to him and were like, "You need to save the party. Step in. You're the only person who's got that name, that experience, that you know, just that kind of awe that maybe will inspire people to get back out and vote Democrat." And I think that he bought into that. And he's like, I do have the experience. And he also probably doesn't know what else to do. I mean, old people, a lot of them retire and just, I mean, that's it, like, right? I mean, I don't want to sound bad. Joe Paterno retires. He'd been through a lot. Boom, he's done. You don't, a lot of people don't move on to that phase as well as they'd like to. So I think probably there's some, this is all I've ever known, all I've ever done. And then there's a lot of the savior complex. You can be the guy who fixes this and takes out Trump. And he's realized that he's not that guy. He's not very compelling. He doesn't know what his message is. And again, he keeps getting in trouble doing all sorts of odd stuff to people of the other sex, children, et cetera. And it's just not a good thing.
I agree. Look, I feel that same burden, so I sympathize. I feel like I'm such a leader of America and really freedom in general. I don't know how I can ever walk away.
Yeah, you are. You definitely are.
Oh, that's obvious. Host of This Is My Show with Drew Bergquist. Drew, I appreciate you very much, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Mitt Romney. Why did Mitt Romney do what he did? What's Mitt Romney's future? We're going to tell you all about it. Hang on. Mitt Romney, ladies and gentlemen. Apparently he had, got called to the principal's office today. The Utah GOP wanted to have a little sit down with Mitt Romney. I'll let you know exactly what was said there as soon as I find out. But clearly it was not going to be an attaboy. And why? Well, look, we have the entire Republican Party unified as it's really ever been for the last 3 years. With all the noise, the worse it got with the Democrat Media Alliance, the GOP, to their credit, has circled the wagons really well. You remember how they treated Kavanaugh? And I have to be honest with you, I was completely ready for the GOP to cave like they always did. And of course they almost did. We all remember Jeff Flake wetting himself in an elevator as some harpy screaming in his face. They almost did, but they held the line. They held the line. And the truth of the matter is most of those spineless invertebrate senators, they're gone now. But we still have one or two floating around. And of course, Mitt Romney is obviously numero uno when it comes to that kind of a thing. And these guys are an issue for us. They're an issue for the Republican Party. No, I do not want senators to be a bunch of little errand boys for the president. I think that's absurd. Each senator has his own mind, and that's fine. But when you have an unjust impeachment of the president of the United States, when the facts aren't with them, when the entire rest of the GOP, not exactly all a bunch of, stalwart conservatives are like, yeah, this is a bunch of crap. And yet there's one guy who decides he has to be the lone Republican voice, just following his conscience and, his faith.
In the last several weeks, I've received numerous calls and texts. Many demanded in their words that I stand with the team. I can assure you that thought has been very much on my mind. You see, I support a great deal of what the president has done. I voted with him 80% of the time. But my promise before God to apply impartial justice required that I put my personal feelings and political biases aside.
I don't believe you, Mitt, and neither does anybody else. I'm not talking about Mitt's faith. That's none of my business. I don't judge other people's faith whatsoever, except for you climate change nutters. You people are insane. But I didn't do it for personal reasons. Mitt, nobody believes that, man. Nobody believes that. This is the problem. When you have Mitt Romney's resume over the last 3 years, nobody's now going to believe that you really just heard the facts of the case and just my faith is what led me to believe it. Come on, Mitt. You lost your election in 2012 because Barack Obama pasted you because you were too spineless to actually fight back. That's fine. Whatever. Some people just don't have that in them. We all can't be warriors. It's no big deal. People are built differently. Then Donald Trump gets elected president of the United States with your endorsement, I might add. And you run to him to beg to be Secretary of State. We even have that famous picture of Mitt Romney sitting down with Donald Trump asking to be Secretary of State. We have the picture of Mitt Romney walking out of the White House after discussing being Secretary of State with Donald Trump. Donald Trump chooses to go a different route. Well, that route sucked anyway, but that's another story. And Mitt Romney got bitter. Runs back to Utah, where he now lives again after Massachusetts, whatever, he's very loyal. Runs back to Utah, runs for Senate, gets Donald Trump's endorsement, which he asked for, wins, and now he decided he wanted to be the petty baby. You remember as soon as he won that Senate election in Utah, first thing he did before he even got back to Washington was pen some big anti-Trump letter. I think it was for Washington Post or something like that. He decided he was going to be the anti-Trump guy, which is fine if that's what you've always been. But that's not what you've always been, Mitt. You've been all over the map, not just on Trump, on every issue under the sun. You're pro-life before you were pro-choice, before you're pro-life, before you're pro-choice. Just depends on where you're living. So you're going to have to excuse me if I don't believe this. Well, it wasn't personal. It's serious. Trump's people put out a nice little video on it.
Slick, slippery, stealthy. Mitt Romney had us fooled.
Being in Donald Trump's magnificent hotel and having his endorsement is a delight.
Posing as a Republican, he tried to infiltrate Trump's administration as Secretary of State.
President-elect Trump is the very man who can lead us to that better future.
Now his cover's blown, exposed by news reports as a Democrat's secret asset.
Can't believe you're going to lose. Yeah.
Barack Obama will be re-elected president of the United States.
Plan B, Plan C, Plan D are now gone. And so you're starting looking at the Romney math and you're saying, well then, what's Plan E?
Tears and a gloomy atmosphere as supporters left the convention center in Boston following Romney's concession speech.
That was a race, I have to say, folks, that should have been won.
I wouldn't call anything encouraging for Hillary Clinton at the moment, to be honest with you, my friend.
Hillary Clinton has called Donald Trump to concede the race.
President of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Oof. Watch out for your sodium content with that much salt from the Trump administration. Look, you can't blame him. And that's exactly what this is. So much of this is just the fact that Donald Trump is president and Mitt Romney is not. You think it's an accident all these guys run for president, lose, and then turn into little backbiting jerks? That's what happens to people who want the ultimate prize, miss out on the ultimate prize, and then have to watch somebody who isn't them gain the ultimate prize. We like to imagine these politicians, these wealthy, powerful politicians, as somehow being above, the petty things that bother people like you and I. But they're not. People are just people. As I've told you, I ran for Congress twice. I've been in D.C. I've had a drink with the Speaker of the House. I've done all these things, met all these different people, and let me just say, they're unimpressive. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying they're all just normal people. They're just like you and I, only with different roles in society. They just happen to be on television. When you think to yourself, man, he wouldn't, surely it's not just a petty little snipe like that. Oh, it is. Donald Trump has no time for people using their faith to attack him.
I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong. Nor do I like people who say, I pray for you, when they know that that's not so.
Hard to blame him there. Trump Jr. took to Twitter and said, quote, Mitt Romney is forever bitter that he will never be POTUS. He was too weak to beat the Democrats then, so he's joining them now. He's now officially a member of the resistance and should be expelled from the GOP, end quote. Well, look, I don't know if they can expel him. I don't even know how that would possibly work, but you going to trust him again? And not to put up too much of a doomsday thing on it, but I want to fast forward something for you real quick. You understand that Donald Trump is likely to win re-election. You understand that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is very likely not going to last another 5 years before retirement. I'm not wishing any ill health on anybody. I don't do that. I haven't never done it and I never will. But you're probably going to retire, probably going to move on. You can only stay in the game for so long. Donald Trump gets to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. the left is going to lose their mind because that will ensure a conservative majority, a solid conservative majority on the Supreme Court for what, 20, 30 years? You thought the Brett Kavanaugh fight was ugly? Ladies and gentlemen, that was a pillow fight compared to what it's going to be if Donald Trump gets to name Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement. Now, where am I going with all that? Do you remember how close the Kavanaugh vote was? We have to bank on Mitt Romney? That excite you? Yeah. Joe Biden came in fourth in Iowa, which is unbelievably humiliating for the presumptive nominee. He called it, well, a punch in the gut.
24 hours later, they're still trying to figure out what happened in Iowa. At this rate, New Hampshire will be the first in the country to get the vote. I am not going to sugarcoat it. We took a gut punch in Iowa. The whole process took a gut punch. But look, this isn't the first time in my life I've been knocked down.
Well, he's right, because that's basically been his entire political career. Joe Biden is a crappy politician. Sorry. Just because you got elected senator in New Hampshire, or Delaware, just because you got elected senator in Delaware, and you stayed there for 30 freaking years, does not make you a good politician. Just because Barack Obama snatched you up because he needed somebody older and wiser and white, and he needed somebody with some foreign policy experience, that does not make you a good politician. Length of time in service does not equal talent. And the truth of the matter is Joe Biden has always been a bumbling fool, and now he's just exposed as that on the world stage. Another critical mistake for Democrats, trying to replace a man they hate. Tom Perez is the head of the DNC. And just to quickly sum up for you, Iowa is 97% in the Iowa caucus votes. Bernie Sanders is the winner. Bernie's already declared winning. I believe he's up by 1.5% as we speak right now. Tom Perez, now that Bernie's the winner, said this: enough is enough. In the light of problems that have emerged in the implementation of the delegate selection plan, and in order to assure public confidence in the results, I am calling on the Iowa Democrat Party to immediately begin a re-canvass. That's recounting the votes, ladies and gentlemen. If you thought Bernie Sanders' rabid supporters were already upset and thinking the party is against them and aiming to screw them every chance they get, go ahead and watch how they react once Bernie wins Iowa and the party calls for a recount. And what if, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but what if they recount and Bernie loses the second time? It's about to get ugly. It's going to be awesome. Coming up next, host of The Roth Effect, Carol Roth. Hang on. Well, one of my favorite people in the world joining me now is Carol Roth, host of the Roth Effect podcast. Highly recommend that one, by the way, if you want something to listen to on your drive. Carol, before we even begin, we've never asked you to break down the Roth Effect podcast. What is it?
So the Roth Effect podcast is me talking about whatever I think is interesting. So usually it's addressing some kind of problem or issue, but sometimes I go a little rogue. And if I find a person I think is interesting, I have them on. We've had JJ French, who is the lead guitarist of Twisted Sister, and Murr from Impractical Jokers, alongside Steve Forbes breaking down monetary policy. So if it's interesting, I'm talking about it.
I support it. That means you probably talk a lot about me. Now, what do you make of this whole Mitt Romney thing in the Senate? People love him, people hate him. Well, I should say very few people love him, but people are really, really mad about this whole thing. He's, of course, playing it off as it's just my principles and my faith. What do you think?
You know, I hate to say this to you, Jesse, but I just kind of don't care. It's one of those things that if it were Donald Trump that was a senator and Mitt Romney that was the president, Donald Trump probably would have voted against Mitt Romney, too. There's a lot of bad blood between the two of them. The whole impeachment was political theater. And let's put it this way. If they didn't have the votes, I'm not sure that Mitt Romney would have taken this quote unquote principled stance. But it was an opportunity for him to kind of get back at Trump for, leading him on and saying, I'm going to marry you, and then kind of dumping him and making him look a fool. So, whether it's principled or not, we can disagree on it. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter.
Carol, you know, not only do you do what you do now, but you lived in, that investment banking world and all that stuff. Long story short, you are not unaware of what rich, powerful people are like. I tried to elaborate a little bit last segment that, people always think that they're above the normal pettiness of things. And I just tried to explain they can be more petty or as petty as anyone else out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You don't have the everyday struggles, so you have to create some additional drama. And so I think they get to be a little bit more petty. And I also think there's something about people who are successful. Typically, people who are successful have big egos. Many of them are psychopaths and sociopaths. I'm not making this up. This is a real statistic. They're attracted to things like being a CEO and politicians and in journalism. Surprise, surprise. So, yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be surprising that even if you have a lot of money, that you're still petty, that the fact of the matter is you probably have a big ego and you want to protect it.
That reminds me of this old comedy bit from The Whitest Kids You Know. It's this comedy group where they put out a fake campaign ad for somebody, and one of his lines in this ad is, "I possess a sort of sociopathic narcissism that leads me to believe I should be in charge of everyone."
It's great, and it's true, and it's how things shake
That's
out.
true.
And at the end of the day, it's what makes the world go round. So, it's just part of the plan.
Carol, what do we do when it comes to China? And I'm asking it from this point of view. Obviously, you're probably not a tariff person because you're about as free market as anybody I've ever known. The tariffs have also been effective. As of this moment, they haven't been eaten by the consumer, at least not in any way I can see. Now, as somebody who's always been anti-tariff, I mean, I'm a Milton Friedman guy. Why should I complain about the tariffs when apparently it's worked, right?
Well, you don't know that it's worked. I think that somebody is eating up those tariffs along the food chain. So whether it's the manufacturer in China, which we obviously wouldn't care about, whether it's the middleman business who now either can't raise their prices or, somehow is losing margin, or it's passed on to the consumer, it goes somewhere. It's not just free money that's like created with unicorns like all these MMT people seem to think money is. So from my perspective, at some point, you can't not pass it on to the consumer. So even if it hasn't hit the consumer for a specific product or service, product, then it will at some point in time. And at the end of the day, taxes don't create prosperity. So from my perspective, I would go after intellectual property. That's the crux. And say, if you're not going to enforce our intellectual property, we're not going to enforce your intellectual property. I would also go after investment. We have a lot of Chinese money coming into the U.S. and saying, you know what, if you require a middleman in order for us to invest in China, guess what? We're not going to let you invest here anymore. So I'd be going after different tactics. I still think we need to be tough on China. I just don't think a tax, which is what a tariff is the right way to do it.
Why have the markets done so well under Trump? I mean, honestly, it's easy to sit here and say, Trump's just the best. But I mean, what are the actual market reasons that the markets have done so well under Trump? I've heard people say that people were just hoarding mass amounts of capital under Obama because they didn't trust him, and they just dumped it all on the markets when Trump got elected. I don't know if that's true or not, but what is the actual financial reason?
So there are a couple of different reasons, part of them that are good and Trump policy related, and part of them that aren't. On the Trump policy side, he has had pro-growth, pro-business policies. He helped us repatriate a lot of capital that was overseas. He lowered the corporate tax rate, allows businesses to make more investments, and that creates more certainty and a better sentiment amongst businesses as well as consumers. It creates more jobs. And so we're seeing that effect in the economy. And when the economy does well, that will translate back into the market. But there's something else that's going on, which is not necessarily a good thing. And unfortunately, Trump has been pushing it on the bad side. And that is the Federal Reserve, who has been tinkering with interest rates and keeping them artificially low. It was something that happened, when we had the financial crisis to try and help us recover. And as we have recovered, even though things are going well, everyone is saying, well, we still need all of this, extra injections of cash into the market, and we need to keep interest rates down. And the reality is those two statements conflict with each other. And when interest rates are down, obviously you're going to be more incentivized to put your money into stocks. So that has been creating this bubble in a lot of asset classes, whether it's the market, whether it's in real estate or otherwise. And unfortunately, at some point in time, that's not a good thing. Either people invest too riskily in assets and we end up with another bubble and another crash that we have to deal with, or, a whole slew of other issues happen. So, one of the biggest ones being, if we have another crisis, there are no arrows left in the quiver for us to then put in place there. There's only so far you can take the interest rates down. Otherwise, you end up in negative interest rate territory, which is what's going on in Europe. And we certainly don't want to be in that scenario. So it's a very dangerous game. And unfortunately, that's one of the side effects for why the market has gone just completely crazy.
Carol Roth, host of the Roth Effect podcast. You were outstanding. I was outstanding too.
Yes. And you are always outstanding. So that's almost just a given.
Appreciate you. All right. We have a Trump ad, meme. I don't know exactly what you want to call it, but I thought it was really freaking funny. We're going to show you. Hang on. Well, you're not going to believe this, ladies and gentlemen, but we have seen the future. An internet, meme maker Carpe Dunctum put out a video previewing what's to come with future presidential elections, and Donald Trump himself retweeted this out there. I think we have a preview now of what's coming. You have to enjoy the fact that the President of the United States flat out enjoys trolling the left. That's all that is a big troll job. You saw the reporters immediately. He's going to be king for life. This is a dictator and people think it's funny. Gosh, I love the guy. All right, people, we'll be back to do this one more time this week. I'll see you then.